And we are live on YouTube now. So good afternoon and good evening to all dear brothers and sisters, and welcome to this meeting of Pragya CS Studio, which is a joint lodge meeting of Pragya Lodge and Sarv Hitkari Lodge Gorakhpur and Pragya Lodge Lucknow. And we welcome you all to today's session. And as always, let us start with the invocation of that universal principle which is everywhere, within and without, which binds us in a thread of love, although invisible. Let us invoke that principle and raise our state of consciousness to hear this talk. I invite everyone to say this prayer, universal invocation. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom, O hidden light, shining in every creature, O hidden love, embracing all in oneness, may each who feels himself as one with thee know he is also one with every other. Welcome back, everyone. And although on the first glance, the subject for today, as you know, the three great truths and the three fundamental propositions, contains few sentences or statements, but in fact, it contains the very core of theosophical teachings. And more than mere sentences, they are like commandments to be contemplated upon, not to be followed blindly, but to be contemplated upon, pondered over again and again and again. And to present this subject, we have with us Brother N.C. Krishna, whom I am having the pleasure to introduce for the second time in the same day, that is today, because in the Indian section meeting also he was giving a talk on life after death, where I had the honor of introducing him. And again in the evening now, I would say the same thing which I said in the morning, that he is a classic example of how, when an individual is impressed upon with typical teachings or theosophy in the early childhood, and not that just by the books or lectures, but by a real life person, a real ideal, then such kind of influence remains with the person for the life, complete life, which is lying in front of the person. And that's why I say this is because Brother N.C. Krishna joined the Theosophical Society when he was just 16 years old. And although he has worked in the field of numbers, he's professionally qualified as a chartered accountant and has been working and has worked as one for many years, and he is settled with his family at Hyderabad. But the most important thing what he would like to share is that he owes everything to his maternal grandfather, who by his example inspired him to join the Theosophical Society. And that is what is the importance of a real life personage, That is the best propagation of theosophy, we can say, by living it, as we were discussing in the meeting yesterday also with Brother Charlie, that real life personages are more infectious in the sense that they infect other people with their love, with their compassion, and with their behavior. And so we have Brother N.C. Krishna with us to throw some light and share his understanding on this very few words, but which contain great depth. So, without taking any more time, I would like to invite Brother N.C. Krishna to share his understanding for on this subject. Brother N.C. Krishna, kindly unmute yourself.
Yeah. Dear brothers, good evening. The three great truths and the three fundamental propositions. This is the topic we have. And the three great truths, which conveys, as just now told by Mr. Sikhar Agnihotriji, the three great truths, they convey the spirit of theosophy, and they're put together as part of an allegorical novel written by Mabel Collins. Lot of the members know these three great truths because it's painted in most of the lodges. But some of them perhaps do not know the source from where these truths have been taken. That's the reason why I'm doing this. It's part of an allegorical novel written by Mabel Collins, The Ideal and the White Lotus. And she is the same person who wrote down The Light and the Path, which was given to her by Master Hilarion. And Mabel Collins wrote this allegorical novel with Egypt as the background. And in this story, the young priest conveys these great truths to the hero of the novel, Sensa. So, straight away we'll go to the three great truths. Let us get into the details of this. The opening remarks before the three great truths are presented. The author says, there are three truths which are absolute and which cannot be lost, but yet may remain silent for lack of speech. There are three truths which are absolute and which cannot be lost, but yet may remain silent for lack of speech. Avacha, as we say in Sanskrit. And the first truth, it goes like this, as we see on the screen. The soul of man is immortal, and its future is a future of a thing whose growth and splendor has no limit. The soul of man is immortal, and its future is a future of a thing whose growth and splendor has no limit. I will read through the rest of the two also, and then we'll get into the description of it. The second truth talks about the principle which gives life. The principle which gives life dwells in us and without us, and is undying and eternally beneficent. It is not heard or seen or smelt, but is perceived by the man who desires perception. The principle which gives life dwells in us and without us, outside us, that means, is undying and eternally beneficent. It is not heard or seen or smelled, but is perceived by the man who desires perception. And truth number three, each man is his own absolute lawgiver, the dispenser of glory or gloom to himself, the decreer of his life, his reward, his punishment. This is the third rule. Each man is his own absolute lawgiver, dispenser of glory or gloom to himself, the decreer of his life, as reward, his punishment. So these are the three great truths. These truths, which are as great as life itself, these are the concluding remarks of the author after mentioning the three great truths. These truths, which are as great as life itself, as is life itself, or as simple as the simplest mind of man, feed the hungry with them. This is the direction we get. These truths, which are as great as is life itself, or as simple as the simplest mind of man, feed the hungry with them. So then we move. The truths are absolute. The truths are absolute, says the foreword to the three great truths. These truths are all eternal verities. These truths are eternal verities. We can't add or subtract anything from this combination or these concepts of truths. The nature of the truth is comprehensive. The nature of the truth is comprehensive, wholesome, and it cannot be lost. Meaning, it always remains in contention as real and truthful. This is what it means. It cannot be lost. Means it is always remaining in contention as real and truthful. Truth is something we cannot put in words. Truth is something we cannot put in words. Truth cannot be described in words. Same thing. Cannot be put in words, described in words. It's just another way of saying it. Truth conveys much more in a state. Truth conveys much more in a state where words are not used. Meaning, silence conveys more, and contemplation on these truths takes us to the door of truths. So, it is not the words which describe the truth, but it is the silence which conveys more, and contemplation on truth takes us to the door of truth. Coming to the first truth, the soul of man is immortal. This is the statement. The soul of man is immortal means it has no death, but we have some components which are perishing. The body of man, or bodies of man, as we talk in theosophy, the lower quaternary, are all perishable. We say ego, and that is eternal and permanent. We say ego again in the common theosophical parlance, which is eternal and permanent. So man should always question who is the real person and what are his requirements. Who is the real person and what are his requirements? This is something, a question which has to put to himself to decide what he should be doing. When the lower quaternary is held in check, there is increased awareness of the higher. Higher principles have no death. When man starts identifying with the real, eternal, higher self, there is scope for growth and to march towards perfection. When man starts identifying with the real, eternal, higher self, there is scope for growth and to march towards perfection. And the statements that future is limitless, the future of the soul is limitless, the growth of the soul, the splendor, the grandeur of the soul has no limit, is true, because the amount of work one can do to enhance the capability of the soul is endless or limitless. It is limitless. There is no measure for perfection. There is no measure for perfection. Hence, perfections to be achieved. Hence, perfection to be achieved on the path that has perfection to be achieved on the path, and that has to accrue to the ego. Perfection to be achieved on the path, and that it has to accrete to the ego. And it also involves a dropping of non-essentials. There is no measure for perfection, hence perfections to be achieved on the path is something which accrues to the ego, and that involves also the dropping of non-essentials. And this process is a continuous process. It stops in a way only when this unit of consciousness called monad merges with universal consciousness. Some people call it a soul death, but it is better to say the individual soul merges with the universal consciousness. The path keeps opening up. The path keeps opening up further as the monad starts perfecting and cleansing and becoming the pure consciousness which he has to become. Suddha Chaitanya, as we call it in Sanskrit. The scope for growth is tremendous, large, and limitless. Right. The second great truth talks about prana, the life energy or the vital energy. It is the one which makes us functional. We get this invisible energy, we are told, from the sun, S-U-N, sun. This life principle is activating us and is also activating everything which is around us, every other being which is around us. We share the same prana tattva with every small creature. We see an ant moving, we see an elephant moving, we see a small plant growing, we also see an oak tree growing. So the prana tattva is there everywhere. So we're able to understand that what aids the growth of the being is that vital principle which is within us and outside us. And this is called life in general. And life has no death. At the end of the person's life, maybe the life goes out of the body and goes back to the source. One cannot hear or smell that life force or that prana tattva. One cannot hear or smell that life force or that prana tattva. One who wants to understand the principle has to use the faculty of his mind, and only through contemplation one can perceive what that life energy is all about. So it is available to that person who desires perception. He is perceived by the man who desires perception. Means who have to put an effort to understand what that is. That perception comes through the higher mind. The third great truth talks and explains about the law of karma. Man is responsible for his thoughts, words, and actions. Each of these produces a result. If the action is positive and helpful, the result which will accrue to the person will be beneficial. If the thought, word spoken, or action is wicked, and then, as per the law of karma, he reaps bad karma and has to pay for the wrong deeds. This is, in simple, the law of karma. In a way, whatever one does, he has a choice. So by doing good karma, he can cover himself with glory. By doing good karma, he can cover himself with glory. And if man's intentions are bad, harmful to other living beings, he is overcome or overtaken by gloom. So this is what the third truth talks about. No one, no agency needs to pass an order of judgment. No one sitting above or no agency needs to pass a judgment, an order of judgment. His thoughts, his words, his actions determine what he deserves. Hence, what he deserves is determined by his thoughts, words, and deeds. So, he is his own decreer, a person who bestows justice to himself. He knows which acts give him punishment and which acts give him rewards. So, using discretion, using his mind with a lot of discretion, leading a contemplative life, he would walk on the right side of dharma and put the right kind of efforts to put him on the right side of life. So concluding words of the three truths say these truths are as valuable as life itself. They're easily comprehensible, easily understandable. So man should use his mind and understand these principles and contemplate on these principles, and also share his wisdom with others who are eager to know these truths. So that's why it is said, feed the hungry. So they are easily comprehensible, understandable. So man should use his mind and also use his contemplation to understand them properly and share his wisdom with all those who are eager to know these truths. All those around you, maybe some of them are hungry for wisdom. So feed them with these contents, is what the concluding words were speaking about. Now we shall consider, having seen the three great truths, we shall consider the three fundamental propositions of the secret doctrine, which has been put up by Madame Blavatsky in that magnum opus, The Secret Doctrine. I won't imagine that there is anyone who perhaps doesn't know these fundamental propositions, but we're only discussing because the subject matter of today's evening's discussion is the three great truths and the three fundamental propositions, and we see if there is any relationship within these two set of facts or set of truths. Now, we shall talk about the fundamental propositions. She urged her students, HPB urged her students to get a proper understanding of these three fundamental propositions. She said, even if it takes time, even if it takes time, the student will do well to get a clear, comprehensive understanding of these three fundamental propositions. A firm, good understanding of these propositions, Madam Blavatsky says, will enable the student to understand any text or concept of theosophy. This is mentioned in a pamphlet, How to Study Theosophy, by Captain Robert Bowden, who collected all the details from her while she was lying on her deathbed. Robert Bowden. So there is a pamphlet, How to Study Theosophy. There, all these details are mentioned. She says, the first principle, the first proposition, she says there is a principle, omnipresent, eternal, boundless, immutable principle on which all speculation is impossible. Omnipresent, eternal, boundless, immutable principle on which all speculation is impossible, since it transcends the power of human conception and could only be dwarfed by any human expression or similitude. It is beyond the range of thought. In the words of Mandukya Upanishad, it is unthinkable, that is achintya, and unspeakable, which is avachya. We can also add perhaps incomprehensible, agrahya. These are all the three, the seventh verse of Mandukya Upanishad. And this fundamental proposition is the most important of the three fundamental propositions, and it will take a lot of time, in fact, more time than other two to explain. The principle, we're getting into the details. The principle is omnipresent, meaning ever present, present everywhere. Omnipresent means ever present, present everywhere. And it is eternal. This principle had no beginning and no end, and always existed. Always existed. So, Adi Madhyantya Rahita, they say in Sanskrit. It has no beginning, it has no stage where halfway through one can understand what it is, or it has no end. So, this is what is that principle which is eternal. And for this principle, we do not know, as said just a while ago, we do not know where the beginning is, where the halfway stage is, and where, if there is an end. Actually, there is no end. It is there always. It will be there always. It is in existence even before the manifestation took place. It was, it is, it will be. That's how we have to understand this principle being eternal. The third adjective used, given in this particular fundamental proposition while describing the principle, is it is boundless. It is boundless. It is a principle which is all expansive, spread everywhere, having no boundaries. Spread everywhere, having no boundaries. Normally, for anything we know, there is a limit or boundary to understand or size up a particular thing. Say, for example, a banyan tree spread in an area of 2.5 acres of land. We know there is a limit for that. And having a trunk of 50 running feet of circumference, we can imagine what is a tree like. But we are able to measure a banyan tree. But this principle which is mentioned in the fundamental proposition, is boundless, immeasurable, because it is spread everywhere. There is no place where presence of that principle is not there. It's present everywhere, and there is presence of that principle is, you cannot find a place where the presence of the principle is not there. Next, it is said the principle is immutable. The next adjective is it is not, it is immutable. The principle is immutable. It is not subject to change. Mutation is change. Immutable is not changeable. It's not subject to change due to passage of time, say for example. Everything else in nature mutates, changes, subject to change. For example, man has stages in his life. His body keeps changing from childhood, youth, to old age, etc. This unique divine principle is immutable and it is not subject to change. And further, it is said, no speculation is possible. No speculation is possible. We can't understand this principle through conjectures. We can't assume maybe this principle is like this, maybe it's like that. We cannot use conjectures and understand this principle. This principle is very specific, yet we will not be able to comprehend this principle by utilizing the power of the human mind. It is a principle which is specific, yet we will not be able to comprehend this principle by utilizing the power of the human mind, because this principle is beyond human comprehension. So if a man tries to express as per his understanding, if a man tries to express this principle as per his understanding, he will end up dwarfing or downsizing this principle. Any amount of words will not be enough to describe this principle. Neither there is any other method of conveying what this principle is all about. So we can't give examples or use similes even. This principle or this truth cannot be compared by giving an example or simile. That's what it means. This principle is unique. HPP quotes, we have already seen that, Mandukya Upanishad. She explains further, this principle is absolute. We can't take anything away from it to understand it. It is Sampurna and Satya, means it is absolute truth. It is wholesome and real. As already stated, this principle is infinite and is eternal, existing at all times. It is the rootless root of all that was, or that was there, or is, or ever shall be. It is there in the past, it is there in the present, it will be there in the future. It is the rootless root of all that was, or is, or ever shall be. This is how we have to understand this. The principle is devoid of all attributes even. The principle is devoid of all attributes even. No quality or characteristics can be assigned to this principle. It is black or it is some other color, things like that. We cannot add. It is not related to any manifested finite being. It is not related to any manifested finite being. Because we do worship idols. Perhaps that is the reason why this has been explained to us. It is not related to any manifested finite being. It's a principle which comes from pre-manifested state. For that matter, anything that is manifested is finite, isn't it? Anything which is manifested is finite. It has a beginning and an end because it is manifested. This is coming from the pre-manifested state. So the principle cannot be understood by associating with manifested finite beings. So finite cannot measure the infinite. Finite cannot measure the infinite. And there's another element added here. She says it is beingness, be hyphen ness. It is beingness. It is not a being. People imagine God to be a being. It is, this principle is, she is not saying it's God. It is beingness, sat. You can call it sat at the most. It has no form. It is sat. To give an easy example, we have a mango. That's a thing. The sweetness in it, which we can't describe, the sweetness of it, which we can't describe, is the sweetness. Similarly, we have the beingness. So sweetness and beingness, just for understanding, not that it is this. It is said it is beyond thought or speculation. As we said, it is achintya, incomprehensible. We cannot use even tarka or logic to understand this. Tarka is using deduction, induction, and trying to find out what exactly one thing is. So we cannot even use tarka or logic to understand this principle. Now, getting into the details of beingness, beingness is symbolized by two factors. One, the absolute abstract space. The one is absolute abstract space, bare subjectivity, he says. The second one, absolute abstract motion, which is also called within brackets unconditioned consciousness. So bare subjectivity means it is just simply what is there in someone's mind or comprehensive mind. Somebody has comprehended something, he's not able to explain about it, he's not able to talk about it, but just he knows something is there. He has applied his higher mind to understand without using words or labels. No words, simply understanding. That is beingness. Be hyphen ness, not being, as I said. Unconditioned consciousness, the second one, the absolute abstract motion, means a state of awareness, unbounded, uninhibited. That is a state of awareness. Man knows it is there, free, not bound by or limited by anything. And the motion, which is talked about as a second factor, is also symbolized by the great breath. The motion is also symbolized by the great breath. No more explanation is required, she says. Simply understand motion as the great breath. The first principle, she says, is metaphysical. The first principle, she says, is metaphysical, meaning it's abhautika, not physical. It is talking about one absolute beingness. Our limited intelligence, we understand and call this as religious trinity. This is what is mentioned in the book. We have, as per the Vedantic tenets, we call the absolute as Parabrahman, and it is that one reality. Then we move over to duality, two. One becomes two, the spirit and matter. So these are not two independent realities, but are two aspects of one absolute Parabrahman. Parabrahman is one, and he has two aspects, and they are not independent realities, but are two aspects of one absolute Parabrahman. Parabrahman, one, spirit, two, and matter, three, are the three aspects of a metaphysical triad. The triad through which all manifestation takes place or proceeds. This is how the book has explained the metaphysical triad. Parabrahman, the spirit, and matter are the three aspects of metaphysical triad, and this triad is the root from which all manifestation proceeds. So there is one more principle which connects these two aspects of spirit and matter. This is a very important point. These two are synthesized, so to say, and that principle which bridges these two aspects of spirit and matter is called Pohat. Pohat. Pohat, loosely translated as Daivi Prakriti, is the bridge or a communicator of the divine thought, and the contents of the divine thought get impressed on matter. So the Fohat is the bridge between spirit and matter. For example, we used to have an old times a fuse, electrical fuse. The two ends, the positive and negative, used to be connected by a copper wire. So something like a copper wire which runs between spirit and matter is Fohat. Fohat is a Tibetan expression, and that's a bridge or communicator which makes the content of divine thought, and that gets impressed on matter. That's Fohat. This imprint of divine thought is what we call as the nature or laws of nature. So these are all the facts which are mentioned in the first fundamental proposition. Fohat is the mysterious link between the great Parabrahman's mind and the matter. In fact, this principle of Fohat animates, electrifies matter, and broadly, the first proposition talks about unity, ekata. And move on to the second fundamental proposition, which is not very lengthy, but very important fundamental proposition. This proposition talks about, this second fundamental proposition talks about the eternity of the universe. And in toto, and says it is a boundless plane, it's a boundless plane, and is periodically the playground of numberless, meaning innumerable universes, incessantly manifesting and disappearing as parts of eternity. The second fundamental proposition talks about the eternity of the universe in toto and says it is a boundless plane. It is a boundless plane and is periodically the playground of numberless, innumerable, it means universes incessantly manifesting and disappearing as sparks of eternity. Innumerable universes incessantly manifesting and disappearing as sparks of eternity. In this, the pilgrim's life is also there. And that life of a pilgrim, it's not one incarnation, mind you. The pilgrim's journey means number of incarnations till he reaches perfection. The pilgrim's life is like a wink of the eye of this self-existence, of this eternity, or of this principle, the Parabrahman. So the pilgrim's life is like a wink of the eye of this self-existence, of this Parabrahman, this principle. The appearance and disappearance of the worlds or universes is like, or compared to the ebb and flow of an ocean, the regular tidal ebb and flow of an ocean, and the flux and reflux. And the second proposition of the sacred doctrine is representing the universal law of periodicity. Periodicity, the ebb and the flow, the appearance of the universe and disappearance of the universe after a period of time. Like we have, for example, the day and night. This is what the book also talks about. Like we have the day and night, the life and death, the sleeping and waking. These factors are understandable and understood universally across the globe. The day and night, the life and death, the sleeping and waking, etc. These are all part of our daily life. And these are true universally all over the world. And we see them happening every day. So we can understand them very easily. Similarly, on a bigger scale, on a larger scale, with an unimaginable time frame, because we can't imagine the time frame for which the universe will exist. So similarly, on a bigger, larger scale, with an unimaginable time frame, we have the appearance or coming of the universe and existing as a universe for some time, and the disappearance of the universe, which is the withdrawing of the universe. So the second proposition talks to us about the law of periodicity. The universe comes into being, exists for designated period of time, and disappears, goes back at the end of the life period. Everything in this universe comes to life, lives for some time, and disappears. Monad, for example, the spark of the divine, has eternity, relatively speaking. It lasts for many incarnations till monad reaches perfection, or the pilgrim reaches perfection, or the ego reaches perfection. Monad is the undivided spark of the ultimate. So the ultimate principle is eternal. So also the undivided spark, which has eternity written all over it. But on completion of purpose, or reaching perfection, the monad merges with the ultimate. The universe disappears. This is the second principle, second fundamental proposition. Then we move to the third fundamental proposition. This talks about the fundamental identity of all souls with the universal soul, or universal oversoul. Universal oversoul. Oversoul is the aspect of the unknown root, or the rootless root, as we call. And a soul undertakes an obligatory pilgrimage. The soul undertakes an obligatory pilgrimage, and this is a must. It's not optional, it is obligatory for every soul. This soul is a part of that oversoul. This soul, the individual soul, is part of that oversoul. So there is a relationship between the oversoul and the individual soul. Through the cycle of incarnations, within bracket necessity, it is sheer necessity, it's not something which we can do away with, the pilgrim or soul undertakes obligatory journey. This happens in accordance with the cycles and the karmic law. This repetitive reincarnation happen in accordance with the cycles of law, cyclic law, and the karmic law. So this is what the third fundamental proposition is talking about. The spark of the oversoul, and the soul, the individual ego. The spark of the oversoul, the individual soul, has to pass through every elemental form of the phenomenal world of this Manvantara. So it moves from the elemental to the mineral to the vegetable to the animal, and then moves to man. Then the spark gains individuality first by natural impulse. And the group soul, when it becomes individualized, it's by natural impulse. That's what the book says. Moving away from group soul, separating itself after that graduation to individuality, man has to move forward by self-induced, self-devised efforts. This is what Madam is saying. Man has to move forward after getting individualized by self-induced, self-devised efforts. Of course, checked by the law of karma. Thus, the individual soul ascends to all the degrees of intelligence. So that's how it reaches the Buddhic plane. From the lowest to the highest. From the lowest to the highest. This is how the journey is. And ultimately, the monad attains divinity. Then the spiritual buddhi, or the divine soul, as we call it, can have an independent existence. And Madam says there are no special privileges or gifts granted to man. There are no special privileges or gifts granted to man. He has to win and earn them by his own personal effort and merit through a long series of incarnations and his personal exertion. The ego, the monad, may reach perfection through the trials and tribulations which undertakes while going through the number of incarnations. What is common between three truths and three fundamental propositions. This is something which I thought I would say as conclusion. The first of the three great truths, the soul of the man is immortal, and the third fundamental proposition, they talk about the pilgrim, the soul. The soul is eternal, and it is eternal till it reaches perfection. So this is the relationship between the first truth and the third fundamental proposition. The pilgrim, through his efforts, can reach the stage of archangel or Jnani Buddha, as we are told in the book. The only limitation is the effort which man might be able to put or not able to put. That's the only limitation. Otherwise, there is no limit to the growth or splendor of that particular soul. As long as he is working towards perfection, there is no stoppage to his growth or splendor. So the first truth talks about the soul, which is immortal, and its growth is limitless. So it is in the third fundamental proposition, where the soul is talked about as eternal and reaches perfection through the various incarnations or through the journey or the pilgrimage. So this is how we can understand the first truth and the third fundamental proposition. The second great truth talks about life or consciousness. The second great truth talks about life or consciousness. It is in a way connected to the first fundamental proposition. That principle of life or consciousness is in us and around us. That principle of life or consciousness is in us and around us. It is said human expression only limits the principle. Human expression only limits the principle, dwarfs it. So we can't speak about it. We can only be conscious of it or be aware of it. We have a mind which can perceive it. The second great truth says one can perceive the quality or the nature of life. So this is related to the first fundamental proposition, wherein we talk about the unity and the consciousness, the beingness, which we talked about in the first fundamental proposition. The third great truth talks about the law of karma. The third great truth talks about the law of karma, which is a factor which operates when pilgrim, as mentioned by the third fundamental proposition, takes many incarnations. The third fundamental proposition talks about the incarnations. And in accordance to the law of karma, the incarnations keep on happening. So if man does good work, he can reap benefits and can determine how his life is going to be, or how his life will be in the future, how his life can be shaped. So he becomes his own decreer. He becomes his own decreer. Man becomes his own decreer. He dispenses justice to himself. He dispenses justice to himself. Choice to cover oneself with glory, choice to cover oneself with glory, or otherwise depends on the work of the man. Depends on the amount of work he does, the amount of good deeds he performs, the amount of extra efforts he takes to be on the right side of law. So otherwise, there is connection, as we have seen, between the third fundamental proposition and the third great truth. So, pilgrim reaches perfection by taking incarnations in accordance with the law, as we have said, law of karma. So, the third great truth is in a way connected to the third fundamental proposition. This, I thought, was in brief the relationship between the three great truths, the three fundamental propositions. We had to spend a lot of time with the first fundamental proposition because it has a lot of details and one has to go carefully. And I know most of you know all this, and perhaps I was only carrying coal to Newcastle. But most of you know about this, but we were discussing because this is a subject which we thought we'll discuss this evening. And only perhaps by going through this again and again, by keeping this in the background of our study, these three fundamental propositions, when we keep it in the background of our study, the study becomes easy. We can comprehend more the concepts of theosophy, and we will be able to progress further in our study. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Krishna, for explaining in detail the three fundamental propositions and the three great truths, and explaining the correlation between the three. And yes, very rightly you said that these, although you said everybody knows that, but I think every now and then we need to refresh and repeat these things, because very often in day-to-day life we read a lot of things, but such important aphorisms or sutras we forget. So every now and then I think it's good to have a refresher like this, as you have explained in a very lucid manner. And I'm sure some of our participants may be having some queries, or if they wanted to share something, uh, you are most welcome at this point. To you can either write your question in the chat box, or you can raise your hand, and we'll invite you to share your question. If anybody, okay, brother SBR Mishra ji from Gorakhpur wants to say something. Yes, brother.
Sir, very lot of thanks to Brother Krishna, our respected lecturer. He has covered the 6 principles, 3 great truths and 3 fundamental principles. This covers the entire philosophy of theosophy, I think so. And I may also like to add that it is all objective of the Parabrahm, which is unthinkable or unapproachable. My 3 questions. Number 1, how many monads are there on the 7th plane? Number 1. Number 2, while studying in consciousness, Sri Ramanujacharya used to say that Fohat is a Tibetan word, and it is a force to which the spark of monad penetrates the matter of planes, say Buddhi plane, Atma plane, like that. So it is the same thing which Brother Krishna has explained about, that it is a sort of electricity which connects the matter and the spirit. The third question is that these 6 principles, it is all objective of the ultimate reality. Is it so?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Shikharji, can you break those questions 1, 2, 3? If I know, I will answer. If I don't know, I'll say I don't.
Yes. I think Brother Mishra ji have put on a lot of questions, but Mishra ji, your first question is how many monads are there, right? On the 7th plane.
On the 7th plane.
That is Atmic
Yes.
plane. So he is asking in how many monads are there.
Because our population is increasing. The world population is increasing. There must be some, say, many Arabs of monad may be there, million and millions. There must be something. There must be some limit.
There are lot waiting in the queue to come into the world. There are lot waiting in the queue to come into the world. So it's all part of the divine plan. So we cannot say how many exactly. Like for example, how many are there, or how many birds are there sitting on a tree. We'll not be able to count exactly. Similarly, there are a lot of monads who are ready, waiting in the queue to come into the world, experience the world, gather all the experience, and move forward. Yes, there are a number of them which are there, which are likely to come and experience and move forward. That is one. Number 2, second question. I don't know whether I have. This is what I read somewhere. The monads are in queue. They're about to break in. They want to come in and experience. Of course, yes, it's part of the plan, the divine plan. How many people should be there? What sort of population should be there? Which country should have what population? Population is also an asset or a liability. All these things will be decided by the national karma. Yes, the second question, Mr. Sukaragnihotriji.
Second question is about it is a sort of electricity which connects matters and the spirit. But it can also be explained as that it is a sort of force of the monad which penetrates the matter of the planes. It is correct. The same thing which you explained like that.
The audibility is a bit of a problem. Mishraji's words are not that clearly audible to me. Maybe
Okay.
it's my problem. Can Shikarji talk about it? He's
Yes, yes.
talking about Fohat, I know. He's talking about Fohat. Tell me.
Yeah, his question is that you have explained Fohat in a way that it is the mediator between the spirit and matter, and through which it is impressed upon the matter. What he is also asking that can Fohat can also be explained or expressed in a form of electricity which carries out, or the force of monad through which it works. Like it is said, it digs holes in space.
Yes, yes.
Fohat, as described by Madame Blavatsky in the book The Secret Doctrine, is a connecting force between spirit and matter, the divine ideation of the universal principle is impregnated on matter through Fohat. That's how the bridge is taking place. The bridge is happening that way. The spirit, the consciousness is there. The divine consciousness plan, that idea is impregnated on matter, and matter becomes active after Fohat enters. So that's the role of Fohat as far as the universal principle is concerned. Whether it is part of man, because is that the question? Is he part of man? Is Fohat part of man? Yes. Man also has spirit and matter. Man also is a combination of spirit and matter. Yes, there must be something which what should combine these two, and perhaps Fohat is the thing which combines these two forces of spirit and matter. And what animates the spirit and matter? The matter gets animated thanks to Fohat, electrifies thanks to Fohat. That's the explanation given. Madam says it is clearly something related to the Venus and the idea of the supreme, and that idea is transferred onto matter through Fohat. Through Fohat. Fohat is loosely translated in Sanskrit as Daivi Prakriti. That's what we talk about in Sanskrit. But we have to understand that in the two aspects of Venus, the spirit and matter, they need to be connected, and they are connected by the third force, which is Fohat. And that's like a fuse that is synthesized, spirit and matter are synthesized by Fohat. That's exactly what the book says. I don't know whether I've answered his query. You talked about holes and all that. I do not have an answer for that.
No. Okay, the third question, Brother Mishraji.
No, it is very clear. No, that is not the question, but it is a sort of a say. I say that whatever has been explained by our brother Krishna ji in 1 hour, may I say that it can be said in one sentence that there is one ultimate reality, and it is all praise and adjective of ultimate reality. Is it correct?
Yeah, if we are comprehending that reality in toto, it is that. Yes, absolutely right. If we are comprehending, which Madam says, no words can describe, no description can. Is it possible to understand the description and all that? If you can understand that reality in one go, using our higher mind, if it happens, yes, that is that.
That's correct, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir, Brother Mishraji. Now
I have a question.
Yeah, Brother Kirtiman, just wait. We already have Brother Jitendra Sampatji from Zambia who wants to ask a question. Brother Jitendra Sampatji, please go ahead.
Let me unmute.
Hi, we can hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to answer the question that Mr. asked to Krishnaji about how many monads are there. In the Master's letters to AP Synod, Master Kutumi says that there are between 52 billion to 58 billion, but they won't give the figure. He says, you have to find out, and when you do find out, you will be self-realized. So that numbers are not given until yourself, when you become self-realized, you will know that figure.
Yes.
And so there is a fixed number of monads, yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your.
Yeah. Okay. Now I wanted to ask a question
Yeah.
to Krishnaji, that he says that monad is evolving. It has to evolve, but I don't think so. It has to be evolved because the monad is perfect, is boundless, is eternal, imperishable, indestructible, uh, immutable, and is naturally glorious. So what has to happen is unfolding, that the ignorance was, the veils came in on our monad, this body and this yeah, the desires and all those are veils that have come in, and we have to unfold them and realize that we are perfect monad.
Did you get that, Brother Krishnaji?
Yeah, he's saying monad is perfect, but we understand monad as we have talked about in the morning also. It is a combination of those three principles, the higher principles, which are permanent: Atma, Buddhi, and higher manas. That those three combined, put together, they're of course perfect, all right. But then the lower quaternary does lot of work, when it comes into the world. So the lower quaternary earns lot of karma. This karma has to be worked out. So for working out the karma, the ego is coming into place in a new body and experiencing or going through the problems or the various situations which the previous life took him into. So the suffering of the karma is through the ego. So ego is perfect, all right. Ego is perfect, all right. The spark of the divine is perfect, all right. But the lower quaternary which gets attached to the ego, when it comes down, it earns a lot of karma. This karma has to be cleansed. And a portion of that, the actions disappear, but the skandhas, the vasanas, they are still hanging. So that also have to go completely, and it has to become a clean slate. We have studied that in the morning. So that is how the cleansing takes place, and the pilgrimage is only to perfect, to keep on improving, further cleansing, so that nothing remains, and then he reaches the stage of divinity or archangel or Jnani Buddha. That's how he becomes that. That's how I understood it. Not audible.
Okay, can we say in that sense? Okay, I think both the things are correct. That yes, monad is perfect and omnipresent and everything on its plane, but to realize that being in the physical body, yourself to be the monad, is like unfolding. So monad is not itself is not evoluting, but as you said, the lower quaternity, it has to express through it. So we have to work on that. So that's what I think, Brother Jitendra, if you have got the explanation.
If there is nothing to work for, so many incarnations are not required, isn't it? If it is perfect and we reach that perfection in one go, it's not, because that soul or that monad gets attached. The 3 and 4, they come together,
Yes.
and that becomes an incarnation. That has to cleanse itself.
Yeah.
That has to cleanse itself.
So,
No, this is what I was saying about Leela. It's a Leela, it's a game that's going on. You are blindfolded when sent to the earth from the sun. We came from the sun and we have come on the earth, right? The sun came from the billions of other suns, and this world was formed. But that's a blind, that's a veil that's been given us. This is what I'm saying. You see, we have to unveil.
Yeah.
This is what it says in a clean life, an open mind, a pure heart, an eager intellect, an unveiled spiritual perception. So we have to unveil only. So this is a game that we have to play. It's a hide and seek game, which we have to find ourselves.
Yeah. Yes, that can be said like that also. So thank you, brother Jitendra ji from Zambia. And now we have brother Kirtiman from Kanpur who would like to ask something.
Thank you, Shikharji. I have a question regarding Fohar. As I have read that whole of the universe, no space is without Fohar. So Fohar is present everywhere. And I was going through some of the documentary, latest science documentary. It was mentioning there that this whole universe, if actually it is being balanced through this dark matter, either on one hand the gravity is pulling, if everything is pulled in, it will be crunched, and it is if it expands, it will be freezing out and it will end up. So this dark matter, is it fohat and is it intelligent? It is consciousness that is balancing this whole universe.
Honestly, I do not know about this dark matter. No, I don't know. I'm
Okay.
not exposed to this aspect of it.
Actually, there is no dark matter.
Okay, yeah, brother Kirtimanji, yeah, brother NC Krishna is saying that this, since you are saying this on the late some modern science discovery and their hypothesis, because these things are not yet proven scientifically yet, and yes, there is a correlation still to be developed, whether what you are suggesting or what you are thinking, whether it's the same as Fohat or something else. Of course, these things can be experienced in reality once someone reaches at that stage, and till that time, of course, everything is a hypothesis. So for now, I think we can, as brother Krishna has clearly said,
A part of it, Shekharji, Fohat is present everywhere in the universe, one thing.
yeah,
And second thing, is it consciousness itself? It is intelligent.
yeah. Yes, that brother Krishna would like to answer, or
What exactly is it? Can you say it again?
is Fohat present everywhere in the universe, and is it intelligent? Does it have intelligence and consciousness?
Definitely, it is able to transfer the divine thought in onto the matter. It means it must be intelligible. Definitely, it has intelligence, no doubt about it. Pohat is a force, like we have spirit and matter. Pohat also is there as a force. So it is there all over, like we said, spirit and matter. The connecting principle, or the principle which actually activates or animates the matter, is Pohat. So it's there everywhere, and perhaps yes, you call it, you don't call it consciousness. Consciousness is something which is, of course, there. Beneficent talks about study in consciousness, and there she says life and consciousness are almost the same. Life and consciousness are almost the same. So the three great truths talked about life. I may talk about it as consciousness also. So they're both same. So Fohat is a force, is a third force which is actually happening and actually bridging the spirit and matter.
Okay, thank you, brother Kirtiman and brother Krishnaji. We have one more question coming from the chat from Sister Zina. She is asking, is the monad attached to the same Atma slash soul life after life? I can repeat if you want.
Yeah.
Is the monad attached to the same Atma slash soul life after life?
Yes, that's a permanent thing. The The higher three principles are the permanent thing. So they remain, and the lower quaternary is something which gets attached every time. So the top three, the Atma, Buddhi, Manas, are always there. So maybe yes, it can be understood like that, or explained like that. So there's nothing much to discuss on it or debate on it. They are permanent, they are there, and that has fallen out of the universal self. The small self has fallen out of the universal self. That remains as that. And as it comes down, every time new incarnation takes place, those three are remaining as it is, and the new dress or new garments are taken by the new incarnation. That is all.
Okay, so thank you, Sister Zina, for your question, and Brother Krishna ji. Anybody else? Anyone else has any question? We can take it up, although the time we are now approaching the end of the session today. So if there are no questions, we'll be going to the closing ceremony with the thanks and the prayers. Or Dr. Rajam, you would like to say something? Okay. Okay.
Hello. Hello, Shekhar. Can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, Brother Jitendra. Do you have another question?
Yes, I wanted to ask him because at the present, the pandemic which is going around the world, is it not related to the third truth, the law of karma? So people are dying. They are the creator of their own destinies, when you say. So does this deaths that are happening now throughout the world, we are blaming somebody else, we are blaming either Chinese, or we are blaming some scientists, we are blaming some pharmaceutical companies. So can you clear that part?
We have the individual karma, we have the group karma, we have the national karma. So perhaps, yes, the nations have not been so careful with their actions. Nations have not been so careful with their actions. Perhaps the nations are paying for it. The nations are paying for it. Maybe as a process, in the process, a lot of individuals who belong to that nation also drop their life, or they make an exit from the plane of existence. Yes, it is part of karma. We have misbehaved with nature, and nature is giving back to us. And the law of karma, as it is said, the national karma, that's working out. Various nations, maybe all the nations, wherever the nature was exploited wrongly, perhaps this is the way in which nature will come back, and we are made to withdraw. We are sitting at home. We're not going out at all. Otherwise, we have been going out and various components of nature. For example, what happened with Uttarakhand? You know what happened? The rocks which used to stop the water were all decimated and converted into gravel. And so the water came down and washed off all the 4 star dhams. So that's how man has been exploiting nature. That's the group karma or the national karma. Yes, very right.
Okay, thank you very much, Brother Jitendra and Brother Sri Krishna. So now we have come to the end of today's session, and on behalf of Pragya CS Studio, Shikhar and me, we extend our heartfelt gratitude to Brother N.C. Krishna, who has taken time from his busy schedule to share his thoughts on this engaging inspiring and fundamental subject to theosophy with all of us. And I'm sure after all the wonderful insights that you have shared today with us, many of us are still more motivated to pursue the study, the research, and to go deeper and deeper on this important subject. So we also want to thank to all the participants from different corners of India and the world who made this session very vital and very engaging with all their questions and their inputs. Now for closing this memorable evening, I want to invite you to close your eyes and let's make a prayer, putting all the willpower and concern for the welfare of all beings, especially during this situation that we are undergoing at the present times. So, everyone, sit comfortable and just connect to your inner being and say in an attitude of sending thoughts to all the beings around us. Om. May all be prosperous and happy. May all be free from illness. May all see what is spiritually uplifting. May no one suffer. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So, thanks again to all the delegates and participants of today's session. And now we are keeping the mics open for a last moment of sharing comments, what everyone wants to say. You can open your mics and just have a sharing moment. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Brother Krishna, and thank you, Shikhar, Brother Shikhar.
Thank you, Brother Shikhar. Thank you, everyone. Brother Krishna. Thank you, Sister Catalina.
Thank you.
God bless all of you.
God bless you. So,
thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Krishna ji. Thank you, everyone. It was a nice session.
Thank you, everyone. So nice session. Clarified really some doubts. Inputs are good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catalina. Thank you, Shikharji. Very nice session. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, so we are closing the meeting now. Wishing you a very, very good week ahead. And we will meet you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you from my side.